And in the studio with me is Steve Cross, who will be running for council this time around. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Sean.
Thanks for coming in to talk a little bit about why you decided to put your name forward this time around.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It was a big decision for me. I'd like to say I blame it on Jeff Battersby. He can be very convincing, but really it was my own decision. It comes from my conviction that our unique town wants to stay unique. You know, we're going to have lots of development. We're going to have lots of issues. Things are going to happen for Revelstoke. The conviction and the reason I decided to run was I just looked at it and said, you know what? This is a unique place. Everyone who comes here says it's unique. So what makes it unique and how do we keep it unique? That got me interested. You know, retaining its mountain town authenticity while growing. And my belief that the way we do that is with inclusion and community involvement. And I think I have some skills to help make that happen.
Well, speaking of the skills, what are some of the skill sets that you feel that you have that you'll bring to the table?
Well, for one thing, I understand that process matters. I've managed large work groups and large organizations going through a lot of change, and process matters a lot. And a big backbone of good process is really good team workings and team management. There's also the difference between governance and management. I get the difference. Governance works more slowly than direct management, but it's just as powerful in setting the tone and the flavor. And I can be a leader when needed. You know, I prefer to work in a true team style, but if someone's got to stick their head up and be a leader, I'm prepared to do that.
So you've been here for 5 years now, and in the time that you got here to where we're at now, what are some of the obstacles that you've seen, and what do you think needs to change? But what are some of the things that you think that we really need to look at and address right away if you were to be elected?
Okay, so I'm going to divide that into two parts to the answer. The first is what I think needs to change,
right,
and the second is the priorities. What needs to change for me? You know, I think we've been blessed with a lot of great people who have done a lot of great work. And like you said, there's been divisions, there's been disappointments, there's been stuff that didn't go the way some people wanted it to. And you see that with the rising fractious voices on all kinds of things that are in our town now. So the one thing I think that needs to change is the process of how we do this process. So the number one thing for me would be the new council working really well as a team. You know, team dynamics are well understood. They've been studied for years. And all teams go through forming, storming, norming, performing. And I would argue that our last council got to the norming part, really good work, doing really good work on a regular basis, but I'm not sure they ever got to the high performance level as a team. So if you look at our governance structure, it's based on a voting structure. 6 councillors. If the council vote is split 3-3, the mayor votes. That's how decisions get made. And the underpinning assumption to that is that every councillor studies all the documents, comes with the total community view in mind, and they might have different votes, but that's the fundamentals. I think there's higher ground to be achieved in high-performance teamwork where everybody gets on the page for solving the problem, not arguing about the differences. And that's a key difference. And I've helped create those teams. I've helped see the results of high-performance teamwork. Now, that fundamentally is up to the team that gets elected, whether they want to go there. It's more work to work that way. But you do get to a higher result. And you end up with a vote, perhaps at council, which isn't about he said, she said, but this is what we believe together is best for the town.
So what was part 2 of that question?
The priorities. I don't go on social media much. I've only been on it with 2 comments so far. And one of them was about our official community plan. I'm tired these days. I'm tired because I'm reading 600 pages of planning documents that our town has in place that are the backbone of who we are and what we do and how we make decisions. One of those is the official community plan, which in my opinion, the front end of it, the values part, is just as valid today as it has ever been. I don't think that's changed, but we need to revalidate that, which wouldn't be a long process. The part that seems badly out of whack is a lot of the zoning parts. Some of that goes back to the 70s, hasn't been updated. And as you can imagine, when if you're a business running a strategic plan from years and years ago and the marketplace has changed, you're not using the right tools to make decisions. For example, in zoning, you end up with almost everything being a one-off application. Variances go up. This takes planning department time because everything is up for grabs and everything's questionable and everything's not understood.
Do you feel that if we address the OCP, and we have to recognize that that would cost some money, but if we address the OCP, that the planning department and other departments would then feel some relief in allowing a little bit more due process and less red tape?
And I think it would make our city staff's job easier too. People don't realize these folks are actually understaffed. They're working really hard, and I'm not saying there's not places we couldn't make more efficient choices. There's always that in any business, any organization. For the most part, people are working really, really hard. So the question is, are we working as smart as we could? And are we supporting people working smart with the right tools in the toolbox and with the right teamwork processes in place? And that's where I think I could add the most value.
What was your hope for 1 year?
Well, I don't have a 1 year game plan. Governance is definitely at least a 4-year game plan, which I'm in for. But my challenge, my rallying cry, I guess I called it at the time, was, let's get the OCP validated on the values part, or altered if it needs it, and get the zoning and all that stuff cleaned up within 12 months. Let's get that done. That's kind of a huge priority to get going. And it's a great opportunity for new council to learn how to work together well as a team. Because there's going to be governance aspects of that come up for sure.
I want to touch base about the fact that we had a green council, and unfortunately, those that had a little bit of experience have had to step down. Now we're going to walk right back into the exact same position. How do you feel about moving forward with that if you were to be on it? And the fact that there's a process before you can really start making decisions. You got to learn due process.
Right. I think it's unfortunate that we've lost all our existing council. There's no question about it. I spent some time leading up to the election process trying to talk to a few folks and say you need to go again because we don't want to lose that experience and that understanding. It is what it is, and we're going to have a green council. That's both an opportunity to start afresh, which is always great. I think it's important that we really work well together out of the gate in terms of understanding that this isn't about making decisions quickly. It isn't about making decisions right away. I mean, if there's something that absolutely has to be dealt with, great, we'll do it. Fundamentally, I think we need to spend enough time to develop good processes around working as a team.
One of the issues that came up a couple of years ago, and you were right in the thicket of it, was when the highway came up. And I've asked everyone here about this, to be fair to all of them. I already know where your stance was on it, as most of the town was. But how do you really feel about what happened up there? Why do you think it went the way it did? And do you think what happened in the downtown core was a benefit, or do you think it really hurt the town after it was all said and done?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually glad you asked. I want to talk about that. First of all, people are out there under the misconception that the so-called protest movement that started was organized by downtown businesses, and that actually isn't true. The whole idea on the papering on the windows was a citizen's idea who mentioned it to a neighbor, who mentioned it to another person, who mentioned it to a couple of businesses. And then a group kind of formed thinking, this needs to be something that the people get to decide, not just slide by the by. And that's how it became what it was. And I can tell you the couple of times that group got together, it was more citizens, far more citizens, 80% citizens than downtown business people. Downtown business people actually didn't want to get involved because they felt, they could lose either way. Now, as it turns out, what was really great about that process was there was the big public hearing. We had a huge turnout. I think, if I remember correctly, there was over 800 people at that turnout. And you know what? It's interesting. The cannabis survey is in that kind of ballpark for numbers, and everyone's touting it as great feedback, great platform for decision making. Well, we had that kind of forum that night at that public hearing, and 90% of the people that spoke weren't in favor of this particular mall development for a variety of reasons. And I think at the end, council made the right decision. It was painful, but the people got heard. And I believe in that. To some extent, I have to have my own convictions, and I do. And I've lived in a small town. I grew up in a small town. My wife grew up in a small town. We've seen this before. We have our convictions, and we're all for development. Absolutely. Just not all development is good development, right? And most importantly, regardless of what I think, Shaun, it's what the people think. The people own this town. We have 11 or 12 distinct neighborhoods. We've got 8 economic drivers in this town. It's pretty phenomenal for 7,500 people to have that kind of diversity, and yet we have that singularity of feeling unique. So what glues that together? And I'm fascinated with that, back to my conviction for running. And I think that, the mall was painful, but it was an example of people being heard. And frankly, I think that people need to be heard. And my job as a counselor will be to help ferment that.
I read a couple of articles about ALR land, and there's lots of concern about that. If it transfers over, once it's changed, it can never go back. And maybe there hasn't been farming 40, 50 years. We don't know what's going to happen when your son is, 60 and Jack is 50. Right? We don't know where we're going to be, but once that land is given up, then it's gone forever. I'm sure you've read all the articles too. Where do you stand on that? What's your thought on that?
Well, my thought is I need to learn a lot more and I need to research a lot more. But fundamentally, I like, there's a couple of quotes that I like in my life. One of which is, when did Noah build the ark? It was before the rain. It's prudent risk management of any governance body to think ahead to what the future could look like. And obviously food security is part of that. And who knows, what technology will bring in terms of being able to grow things and offer more local food. As you know, and lots of people know, I'm huge on shop local, keep it as local as possible. Food security is part of that thinking, I think. So I need to learn more, but fundamentally, I think it's prudence risk management to look at this closely.
Steve, have you had any fears that if we were to have a bigger business come in, that it would wash out some of the core of the town, and not just for your own business, but for the overall ambiance of this community? Do you think that is still a possibility?
Well, it's always a possibility. Change is change. As far as our own business goes, Revy Outdoors, my wife and I have multiple sources of income. We do Revy because we love it. We do Revy Outdoors because we love it. But we don't have to have it. So, we don't think about that much when we make choices, convictions on our own. This gets back to what do the people want the town to be? And I can envision lots of commercial development. Here's the thing, Shaun. Here's a very interesting point, right? Right now, our downtown is very small. But there's lots of room for it to expand and grow and develop along 1st and 2nd over to Garden Street. And to some extent, there's a little bit of growth available going the other way as well. As soon as you start fracturing that, significantly fracturing it, then you risk never having that development happen. I think we'd like to see, my guess is citizens would like to see that develop first before we start spreading stuff all over the place. That said, our 11 unique neighborhoods need convenience retail. They really want all our neighborhoods. The Big Eddie has the Big Eddie pub, which is fabulous. If you're over there, you can go, have your own distinct setup. So the question is, if we build convenience retail in our different neighborhoods, which I personally think would be great. I don't know what people think. I'd love to learn what they think, but I think it'd be good. What does that look like? Do we just want a cement block building, a little strip mall thing? Personally, I don't think so. Every neighborhood has a chance to be unique, but it'd be great if our Columbia Park folks didn't have to cross the highway to buy some basic groceries and go out for a drink with their partner, or that kind of stuff.
Is there anything that I haven't asked that you think is important for the listener to know about yourself as we move forward towards Tuesday?
It's going to be repetitive. I don't think there's anything that you haven't touched on that I wanted to speak to. I am firmly committed to people having a voice. I'm firmly committed to, ideologically, to our town remaining neat and neat and unique. Neatly unique is what I was trying to say there. And I think that's possible. I think we can higher ground on the intersection of all those economic development drivers, all those outdoor recreation drivers, and sustainability. I think we can do it.
So if anyone has any specific questions, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, as it happens, I'm running some coffee house chat sessions, and I'd love to hear from people what they think it all means to be unique. Now, those sessions are going to be starting next week, Wednesdays and Thursdays. The Wednesday ones will be 10 to 11 at the Modern. Thursdays will be 1 to 2 at Conversations. And I'm just going to sit there with a coffee, and if anybody wants to come up and chat with me about Revelstoke and what they think makes it unique and how to keep it unique, that'll be great. The other thing is, if you want to talk to me in person, you can call me at 814-3547. That's 250-814-3547.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve, for coming in and sharing a little bit about why you're running.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.